Awesome. All right. So thanks everyone for joining for the second community meeting of 2021. Really excited to have everyone here and welcoming Khachat. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. We have a few things to go over. I'm just going to go over the list of what we have here. I'll put it in the chat for the agenda. And whenever you give your status update, just kind of give a short little intro of who you are and what you do here, and maybe just a tiny little background, so that the community knows who you are, is familiar with you. So I'm going to start with Matt. Do you have anything to cover? There's nothing here, but I just want to.
There's nothing here because I think Margot covered our shared status pretty well. One of the things that the VMware set of us do a lot is pair programming. So oftentimes, two of us are working on the same thing for the week, and that's me and Margot this week. I'll wait and let Margot summarize.
Cool. So moving on, Mo.
So I think, let's see, myself, Ryan, and Andrew have been sort of working together on the supporting multiple Pinnipeds on the same cluster epic type deal. So we're slowly making progress on that. But it's pretty close. I think we'll probably have it mostly green this week. So one little details there. I don't know if I should go into any technicalities of it. I should just say that's what we're doing.
Ryan, do you have anything to share?
No, as Mo mentioned, I've been working to support Mo and Andrew on that track of work. And I also worked with Matt and some other folks in the team to try to organize our priorities earlier this week.
Maybe, I don't want to cut off Margaret. Maybe it would be good to briefly dive into why we care about having multiple Pinnipeds, or like what exactly we're doing there and what the problem is. This issue kind of doesn't describe it all that well.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But essentially, like,
you want me to do that now or after we go through?
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's finish. But I'll add a little. I'll add a note.
Okay, Andrew.
Yep. Nancy, I think you said maybe do some introductions too. So I'm Andrew. I'm a engineer. I work at VMware, and I've been on the Pinniped team, I guess, since it started, although I wasn't really involved in much of the planning pre the team forming. And then I participate a little bit in upstream Kubernetes, mostly in SIGAuth, and working at VMware since it was acquired by Pivotal. Mostly work on alt stuff, although my background is in more of networking things. And my update was mostly covered by Mo. So we'll dig into it in the discussion topics, but we mostly have just been iterating on tests and CI to get this multiple Pinnipeds one cluster thing working. So that's me.
Did you want to highlight the whole debuggability bit? Because that's like, I think, generic on its own.
Yeah, that's true. Nancy, do you want me to go through that issue now, or do you want me to punt to later?
Yeah, go through the issue now.
So Mo and I were debugging this problem in CI today, and Mo had the really good idea to turn on audit logging in our Kubernetes clusters to get a little bit more of an idea of what was going on under the hood. So specifically, there was a secret that was getting deleted, and we weren't sure why. And so Mo was like, turn on audit logging in our kind cluster that we were using, and we turned it on, and we figured out who was deleting the secret, and it was incredibly helpful. So the proposal, we opened an issue, and the proposal was to enable audit logging in our test environment clusters. Maybe a pro is observability here. A con is it's just, you know, more infrastructure code to enable those features. We didn't see any performance slowdown, but maybe there's some of that behind the scenes. And I guess another con is maybe resources. Like you could maybe overflow a Docker volume with an audit log, but I'm not losing much sleep over that just because that's an ephemeral disk that just gets deleted after all of our tests run. So that's kind of a high level view of this issue.
Cool. Should I mark this as in progress? It sounds like you're working on it.
We're actually not, unless you want it to be in progress, it didn't have any plans to start actually adding it to our test environments.
Okay. Okay. All right. This is a good idea though.
We SSH'd into the VM and
That's fine.
I showed Andrew how to mess with a static pod live.
Yeah. Every time I have a like track record that like 9 out of 10 times when I do that, I crash the API server and it never comes back up and I have to.
That's very familiar.
This maybe opens up another discussion topic that might be good, which is like CI transparency. I think a lot of the things we're talking about here are only available. We haven't found a safe way to open them up. You have sort of like read-only access through Concourse, but we don't have like a safe way to expose like all the CI jobs and how they run, and we don't really have a plan for how we would open up that access in the same way that like Kubernetes does for test infra. Ultimately, maybe not all of it would ever be opened up, but they're not publicly opened up. But I think I would like to find some good middle ground that's maybe a little closer to public than we are now. Anyway.
So if I understand correctly, though, for kubecI, even as like a member of the org and stuff, all I can see from CI runs, because I'm not in like the test infra group, is I can see all the artifacts. So
That's
you have
true.
a lot of visibility on what happened, but I guess I think some of the repos are open and I could go try to change the test jobs or something, but I can't like
you can't like SSH in and do stuff. I mean, we don't want that, but you can go for most of the Kubernetes jobs. You can go see the job definitions and see what the test is going to run,
and for the most part, like the job definitions don't matter because they just run a suite of tests, and you see a failure, and you're like, all right, let me like look at the audit logs or something. Like you just need the metadata. But I do remember in OpenShift, I could get kubectl access to a running CI cluster, and that was always really nice.
Should we finish the status update section?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Margot.
So I guess Matt and I have been working on writing an impersonation proxy. So currently we have the concierge piece of Pinniped, which you give a token to, and it gives you a cluster certificate back. And we want to get around that by having an impersonation proxy on that cluster to just give a token to, and then act as that, run the command as that user. So this issue explains it in a little more detail.
Yeah, we can talk about it down here too. So discussion topics. The first one is like, what's in our next release besides the multiple Pinnipeds thing? And then I added also, what do we think is the schedule on that release? I would say my opinion as a starting point is there's nothing in 0.50 besides the multiple Pinnipeds feature and any ancillary like bug fixes we happen to merge before then. But even if for example, even if the impersonation proxy isn't finished, we need to make sure that it's releasable at each step so that as soon as we finish the multiple Pinnipeds thing, we can kind of release safely. Anyone else have a differing opinion or the same opinion.
So, but if I understood what you said correctly, though, that would mean that the only thing we would try to merge into main right now is very safe things and the middleware logic, and like nothing else. We would just hold off on stuff until we could cut a clean release.
Yeah, I think so. So like, I think like with the work Margot and I started, we haven't merged anything else in yet, and I think we should consider that we shouldn't merge it in until, even if the feature is not complete, it's at least in a state where it's not dangerous to release the code. So like right now we have a proxy that listens on a port and it does all the right authentication. So we think it should be safe to merge, even though it doesn't really work yet. You can't really, it's not documented and you can't really use it yet. I would consider that we could probably merge that to main. That would be fine, but we wouldn't actually consider it released yet, even though the code was there, or even though some of the code was there. But I don't know. This might be a point where we talk about, like, I think the reason we would have to do that to merge it in is because we have more tests running in our main pipeline on main than we do on our PR pipeline. And so we would want to merge it so that we could, for example, deploy it through some acceptance environments and test it on different kinds of Kubernetes clusters. Otherwise, and maybe the other reason is just to integrate early and not have to have merge conflicts. But in this case, I'm not that worried about that. So I could also see a valuable path where we try to enhance the PR pipeline so that we can test in more different environments, at least some of the time, for long running feature branches. And we would just hold this feature off until it's completely finished and merge it in, which would be cleaner like the release log would be easier to write then, right? Because you would say like, oh, this feature was not there at all before and now it's finished. And in the meantime, we were free to release whatever we wanted. But I don't know.
While we're on the subject of the multiple Pinnipeds, Mo, do you want to go ahead and just talk about why multiple Pinnipeds?
Yeah, I can. So the general problem is, and a lot of other projects have similar problems, and they kind of, I would almost say they ignore the problem, which is whenever you have a very Kubernetes native workload like Pinniped that is incredibly dependent on CRDs for the bulk of its work, and even more so with an aggregated API service, right? Even though these resources in themselves can be namespace, the actual definition, so like the schema of those things is defined cluster-wide, right? So like there's only one concept of a pod in a cluster. Different namespaces don't have different concepts of pods. And I mean, that's basically a hard Kubernetes requirement because a lot of things just wouldn't work right if you could have like namespace scope CREs, for example. So with that problem in mind, what ends up happening is if you try to install more than one Pinniped on a cluster, like a lot of VMware technologies might want to do, you don't know which one's going to win. It's basically whoever shows up last will probably step on whoever was there before and put the whole thing into an incoherent state. Maybe the last one would keep working somewhat, but certainly the ones installed before wouldn't. So the approach that we came up with is we basically want complete isolation between every running Pinniped. And the way we wanted to do that is by making it so that the API group that the CRD and the API service are in can be dynamically changed at runtime. So the middleware logic that I've been working on allows like 99% of our code to not care that that is happening under the hood, and then sort of magically rewrites API calls to the right place and decodes and encodes stuff as you would expect. But yeah, but the general idea is we don't want Pinniped to be a singleton on your cluster. We want you to have as many as you want to have. You just have to give them different sandboxes to play in. Because there isn't a like Pinniped specific requirement that prevents you from running more than one. It's a Kubernetes constraint that currently prevents you from running more than one.
If we get this working, I think I think this is another one of those things we could consider writing a little blog post about, because I think it's interesting as from a Kubernetes dev standpoint.
I don't know if I
Like,
want to
then
go.
James Munnelly will read this, and then cert manager will have this feature in a future release.
That would be nice.
No, I'm sure this topic has come up at like Kubernetes API machinery SIG before, because it's a hard thing about Kubernetes right now for us, but also for any kind of like CRD driven operator controller kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Khachat, you're still on the call?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, just turn off
It's okay.
video. Thing left messing with my left eye, so I'm sitting like this.
No worry at all. Feel free to leave the video on or off, whatever you're most comfortable with. So you were asking about the public roadmap.
Right. So a roadmap, or basically a project plan as such, basically, like as an outsider, I'm just hoping to see what's the immediate plan, like say for the immediately upcoming release. What is the focus on, which features as in you're developing, and how said feature kind of plugs into the overall design of things. Because like I mentioned, like I don't have much clarity over the eventual goal of the project, like 1.0, what all you're hoping to have in that. So yeah, some information about where the project is heading, or what components, what's the plan, even an overarching outline would be helpful for someone who is not associated already with the project, is what I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of things I think we should do in that direction. One is so from a immediate planning standpoint, we are in general operating in a pretty kind of agile methodology, where we're only really strictly planning a couple weeks at a time, like what we're kind of actively planning to pick up. But I think the two things that I think we need to invest in a little bit more. One is categorizing some things into some GitHub milestones. So we have like a milestone right now for the 0.5 release, and then we have another milestone for the 0.6 release, but it doesn't have anything in it yet. And we could start to even if we're not ready to prioritize them, we could start to say like, oh, here's some future release where we add this feature, and start to thinking of that as a little bit more of a roadmap. And then we also have a documentation page that I think is probably needs some attention, which is a scope page. It's this page, which is meant to be a list of things that we do and don't intend to do in this project. That's relatively open-ended, but also kind of helps people understand what might be a plausible feature, and what might be better to do in another project, or as an add-on or something like that. So in general, I think this is all still correct, and we've been still trying to follow this, but it's also a little bit vague, because we wrote it 5 months ago, before we'd even built the supervisor, which is like one of the major components of this. So I think we could probably take another shot at editing this and maybe be a little more specific. I don't know. What does everyone else think?
It's maybe worth sharing with Khachat a little bit of the bigger picture too, that Khachat, we had a very clear focus as a team of VMware employees working on this open source project of what we wanted to accomplish by the end of December. And we had months of work, and we executed it all. And now we're kind of in a phase where we have to decide what we want to do with the next several months. And I don't think we've quite decided yet. So part of why we're struggling to share a really clear roadmap in this moment, in this meeting today, is that we don't have one, to be honest. We have a bunch of ideas. We have a lot of ideas, but we haven't organized them into a very clear roadmap just yet.
Yeah, and it's because all the things we knew we needed to do for sure, we did, and they're done, which is good. And now, like Ryan said, now the future beyond here is lots of cool ideas, basically, and we don't have we're struggling to really plan out what's most important first.
I'd be interested, if everyone's okay with asking Khachat some questions. I'd be interested in hearing from you, Khachat. How would you like to perhaps get involved? Was there a particular kind of work you're looking for? Is there a particular way that you were hoping to contribute?
Okay, so here's the thing. I can share. Oh, sorry. I realized some folks joined. I joined before some folks, so I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. Hey, I'm Khachat. I'm in India currently, and I haven't done a lot of open source contributions. I made minor PRs to a few projects. The only one substantial enough to mention would be, I guess, Jupyter Hub. Added few Prometheus metrics to the project. So where I'm coming from, my goal is to get a little more involved in open source in general. So I was looking at projects where, basically they kind of, I resonate with the goal. And authentication and authorization is one space, specifically in the cloud native ecosystem. I feel that currently requires a lot of work. As in, at work, I work with Kubernetes and such, and authentication, authorization, access control. I don't see the standard tooling that I'm hoping to have any out there. Like, there is no project that I feel that, hey, this is what we can just use off the shelf and this will get us running. I mean, the closest thing I think I've seen is Dex and Gangway. I'm sure you folks know a lot more about it than I do. Yeah, so I mean, really, the closest thing I could see towards a standard authentication page through which you can route the user to a cluster is the TGIK video that Joe had, where he showcased Gangway. So that was where my interest really drew into it. When I saw it Pinniped, I felt very compelled to help out in this project. In terms of how to contribute, so documentation is something that I have a natural predilection towards. So I mean, even at my company, I'm kind of the one creating project wikis and nudging everyone else to add the content to documentation and curating said wikis. So I feel that's the lowest entry barrier for any project. So that's how I started with Pinniped so far. I've made small 2-3 PRs, I think, up to Pinniped. I'm hoping to get more involved with the code itself. But full disclosure, I am kind of a noob in Golang. And apart from that, I don't have very good knowledge, I would say, regarding authentication and authorization itself. And that's kind of the primary goal where that I have towards getting into a project. Like, it's to learn about things. I mean, so I mentioned Jupyter Hub. So I went ahead and added some Prometheus metrics there because that was the time when I was trying to learn Prometheus. So I kind of learned by doing it, and doing it in open source kind of gives you that nudge for accountability, and you see that your work has impact. A lot of folks are going to actually use the products you build and so forth. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. If you have anything specific to ask, I can tell you.
That was really helpful. Thank you for, yeah. Reminds me that we've been meaning to get Joe to do a TGIK episode about Pinniped pretty soon.
Oh, nice.
I think Gangway. So I think I see Pinniped as essentially the next version of Gangway. It's a lot more complicated, but it's basically solving the same problem of taking the OIDC web browser based identity login system and making the piece that connects it to Kubernetes nicely, which Gangway was a good first try, but I think we've done something a lot better now. I mean, thank you so much for the documentation PRs you've sent already, and like we're happy to help grow your Go capabilities. I think Pinniped so far is a pretty good example Go project. I'm a little biased, but I think we have some interesting, relatively idiomatic Go code, especially in that kind of Kubernetes flavored Go. Lots of patterns of like using Kubernetes controllers, and I don't know. I've learned a lot. A lot of people on the project are relatively new to Go, but I think we've done a good job building a coherent code base. So.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah, I've started on this project in December, and I started writing Go code in December. So you're not.
This was also my first Go project.
Oh, great.
Not alone in being new.
Not my first Go project, but it's like one of my first big Kubernetes client Go projects that I've done that wasn't a hack. So
Rashad, I heard you mention that at your place of employment you contribute a lot of documentation and that you enjoy doing that, I think you said, and that you're also interested in finding a way to contribute to the Golang stuff. Did you have particular ideas or hopes for the way that you would like Pinniped to work, or are you coming more looking for suggestions for things that you could contribute?
Yeah, it's the latter. I'm like hoping to get suggestions over how to get started with it, like not something too big at once, which kind of overwhelms me or something. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. Nothing specific as such. Like I'm not looking at to work on a particular component or something. Whichever way you folks suggest, I'd be open to that.
So have you seen there's like a couple of issues that have been tagged with good first issue? I don't know if that feels accurate to you, but
right. So I did look through some of them, and there were, I think, one or two issues about. Yeah, I remember seeing the first site one, and there was one about what do you say, the tilt file, something. There was some flakiness in that. I don't know if that issue is still open or has been closed.
I think Andrew got that one this week, last week.
Oh, nice.
So good. Yeah, I think I know I haven't very recently gone through issues to try to make sure these labels are applied well. But certainly, like my intention, and for us that are really working on full time on Pinniped, is that we write clear issue descriptions so that somebody who's not spending 40 hours a week working on Pinniped could find one of these issues, understand the problem, and solve it. And so I don't think we're hitting that goal 100% of the time, but I definitely want to try to get to that point.
Yeah, sure. I'll be giving them a shot. So truthfully, I haven't been able to spend much time on OSS in 2021 so far. That's all. Like, I mean, I wasn't making any complaint or anything towards lack of issues. Yeah, just that so far. I mean, yeah, it has been a little daunting to actually get into the code and.
Yeah, that's totally understandable too. I've been on this side of the contributor process too, of like working on Kubernetes when it wasn't really my job to work on Kubernetes, and you're just kind of finding some spare hours, and it's hard because it's not a commitment. You're not necessarily making a commitment to spend a certain amount of time or to solve a certain number of issues or anything like that. It's just a thing that's engaging to contribute to, or maybe if you do find places to use Pinniped at your job, and there's particular features that are missing or bugs that you run into, and you can find time here and there to do little things, but never feel like you're on the hook.
I understand just that.
Welcome.
Been a bit personally busy. That's all. Hopefully next weekend I'd get to some of the issues.
Cool. I think
maybe we can all be on the lookout for things that we think Khachat might be. We could reach out on Slack if we think of any, point out the issues to you. I think one of the possibilities that comes to mind off the top of my head is that you mentioned you enjoyed working on documentation for open source projects. One of the things on our roadmap is to improve our documentation. We haven't prioritized that for ourselves just yet because we have some other stuff that we're working on at the moment, as we mentioned in the status updates. But I think we have some specific ideas we might be able to send your way if you're interested in working on that. We could file some issues.
Sure. That'd be great. Yeah, I think so. Apart from just adding documentation, I find documentation is a good way to learn about an existing piece of software. So I think that would really help build my confidence. Like when I have a better understanding of the project myself, then I think I will be a little more comfortable in delving deep into the code as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be great, Ryan, if you can point me towards
one example of some documentation that we have been wanting to write is some specific kind of solution guides. So we have the demo, we have like a demo script right now, but really like some specific, like here's how to enable Pinniped, here's how to enable pick an identity provider, Okta or Google or
Google Auth, let's say.
Yeah, here's how to use Google Auth on your Kubernetes cluster, and just walks through it, end to end, and just specifically for that one environment.
Right.
So that, yeah, I mean, what we would like to be is like that Pinniped is the thing that you find as a Kubernetes user when you say like you start searching for how do I set up Google login on my Kubernetes cluster, Pinniped, and here's the guide of how to do it, and hopefully it's easy. You just install Pinniped and configure it, and it all works. So
yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. I'll note that down. Thanks.
Okay. So I can tackle this agenda item real quick. So Margot and I are working on this impersonation proxy, and really the goal there is to make Pinniped work on more types of clusters. So the way that we built the concierge right now means that you can only log into Pinniped. You can only use Pinniped to log into a cluster if the cluster is a special kind of cluster. It's a special kind of cluster where the control plane node is accessible inside the cluster, which covers
self-hosted. Is the term?
Yeah, self-hosted is the Kubernetes word. It's like kind clusters are like this. A lot of the VMware distribution clusters are like this. A Rancher cluster is like this. OpenShift cluster is like this, but it doesn't include any Kubernetes cluster. So you can't use Pinniped today on AKS, EKS, GKE clusters because they don't have that property. So what we're trying to do with the impersonation proxy is add a kind of a second backend to the concierge that allows it to work on those type of clusters, which then means Pinniped will work on pretty much any Kubernetes environment. So that's the summary. And I don't think we'll get there. Like I said, I don't think we'll really ship this in the next release. It'll probably be the release after. So I think in my mind, like 0.50 is probably really solving the multiple Pinnipeds issue. And then 0.60 is probably solving the any Kubernetes cluster feature. I added this item here, but I actually don't have any really specific ideas about what we can do. So Khachat, just for like transparency here, so we have the Pinniped repo, and the Pinniped repo is public, obviously, and it has all of our tests in it. And when you open a PR, you get commit status, update. So like I opened this PR, I get to see all my green check marks about all of these concourse jobs that ran. And in fact, I can click on one of them and I can see, for example, that unit tests ran. So that's great. But actually, like I can't see as a community open source user, I can't see the definition of those CI jobs, because that's all in a private repo that we have that only the VMware folks here have access to. And one of the reasons is that it's not. So I don't think it might have. So I don't think it has secrets in it. That was maybe the fear, is that maybe we had some kind of secrets that were part of the definition, but. Beyond that, there's a mix of definitions in that repo of things that are testing the open source project and things that are really testing internal VMware integrations, which are not interesting to the community. I wonder if we could
also combined in as a third thing, which is how we deliver the software.
The release packaging pipeline stuff, which could be public actually. I wonder if we could actually try to split those things to some extent, even if they all kind of ran the same way, even if they were all deployed onto Concourse the same way as they are today, but actually we just split off like the PR pipeline and maybe even the piece of the main pipeline or some of the other little ancillary pipelines that we have, and they could live in a public CI, Pinniped public CI repo. Where at least the idea would be, as a community user that opened a PR, when I go see that like, oh, I have a failing test, I actually have no idea what, like, this is an example, this uninstall test. I actually have no idea what that does if I don't have access to go look at the job file. Anyway, is that something that we are able to take on, do we think?
Add it to the list of good ideas that need to get prioritized. It probably wouldn't be that hard if we just wanted to make the PR pipeline definitions public, because we could just split that into a separate repo and make it public. Splitting the main pipeline up into multiple pipelines would be a little bit harder, but still doable.
Yeah. And maybe even some of the acceptance environments that we have now, the pipelines for those, some of them actually could be valid public things. Like pretty soon it's going to be valid to deploy Pinniped on GKE and test it, and deploy Pinniped on EKS and test it. It might get expensive to do that on every PR, but it still might be worth it. Or it might be worth it to do it sometimes. Anyway. Okay, I will take an action item. Let's see, we don't have a, let's say we'll take a category here for action items. Warrior file an issue. My N key is broken. File an issue about splitting up and making more CI definitions public. Did we have other? I think we had an action item around. These are maybe two action items. Grooming our milestones, like making sure that we have like the 060 milestone starting to kind of have some items in it. Another, I guess, a discussion here is that we have been doing project planning on GitHub, but before that we were doing project planning in another tool. We've been trying to figure out the right way that we can maintain really good focus and prioritization as a team, and also be really transparent about what we're working on and what our priorities are. And so I expect that we're going to figure more of that out in the next few weeks and have a better like shared vision for how that works. Okay. Is there anything else? Otherwise, I think we had our first very successful community meeting second successful community meeting of 2021.
Awesome. And I just want to say thank you again to Khachat. Like, it's very helpful to have you on here, and really excited to have you part of the community.
Thanks a lot.
And this will be posted on YouTube as well, just to, so you can go back and look at it and review anything. And I'd also like to get your feedback, if you want to think on it, on how this meeting went for you, if there's anything else you would like to add from a community member perspective, what would be helpful for you moving forward with these meetings?
I found it fairly helpful. Like, I got a significant chunk of the meeting time. So people were receptive. I got direction for moving on, how to go from here regarding development. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. Nothing, I don't have any constructive criticism, so to speak. It's been good.
Great. Great. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, evening, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.